Today on this episode of the After the Timeout podcast, we are joined by Matt Monroe, head boys basketball coach at St. Ignatius High School in Chicago and Illinois Basketball Coaches Association executive board member. We talked to Coach Monroe about his coaching journey, the state of the basketball coaching profession, as well as the goals of the IBCA. We also get into St. Ignatius' journey downstate and preparing for the summer after such a successful season. As always, thank you for listening to the After the Timeout podcast.
No.
All right, Coach, let's start with our opening tip. So you got your start as a manager at DePaul University. So this is a multi-part question here. First of all, what were some of the lessons you learned as a manager? And then maybe some of your favorite jobs and probably even some of your least favorite jobs as a manager, because I'm sure there were some of those. So let's start with that.
You know, being a manager definitely had a tremendous role in shaping not just me as a coach, but really who I am as a person. There's so many incredible life lessons that you learn being a manager. You know, in terms of some of those lessons, I think the first one is just the importance of having a really, really good work ethic. You have to put in a ton of time, especially in unseen hours, stuff that doesn't go noticed and stuff that's really important to the operation of the program. So developing that work ethic was a big part of my experience as a manager, but also understanding that there's no job that's too small that should not have the most attention that you can possibly give it. You know, even if it's washing the laundry or packing the bags or setting up the gym, you know, all those things make practice run, make a program run. So there never was a job that was too small to have us focus on and give our best effort. Some of my favorite responsibilities as a manager, well, I was very, very lucky. Our DePaul University coaching staff at the time, head coach Dave Lato and his awesome assistants, they knew that I wanted to be a coach, and that was really what my passion was. So certainly I had to do a lot of the roles that every managers do. Like I mentioned, you know, getting the practice equipment out, doing the clock, washing the laundry, packing the bags. But they also allowed me to do things that would help me through my coaching career. For example, I was in charge for a couple of years of our film exchange program for scouting, sending out VHS tapes to other schools, getting that dual deck tape recorder going to splice up games, sending letters to other colleges and calling them to organize our scout film, typing up practice plans. They would also let me sit in on meetings that the coaching staff would have. They would talk with me about X's and O's, practice plans and strategy for games. So it was a really cool experience. My favorite things were definitely the things that allowed me to kind of learn as a coach. And I would keep a notebook with me wherever I went. And every single time a coach said something, a teaching point, taught a skill, did a drill, introduced a concept, I would take notes on every single thing that I learned. And I still have those that I reference today. Some of the jobs that weren't fun, I mean, I did learn how to do laundry by being a manager. It's not something that I knew how to do before. So it had a practical purpose, though it wasn't the most fun thing to do. Certainly having to rush and clean up the floor if anyone fell down, you know, wasn't the most glorious thing, but it was important. I really enjoyed doing the clock because it gave me a front row at practice every single day, though there was one time that I couldn't get the shot clock straight. So Coach Lato had to make me run a few laps for messing it up one time too many. But being a manager was an outstanding experience. I was actually talking with one of our graduating seniors today, and he's really close to committing to being a manager at the University of Oklahoma. And we had talked about all these experiences and how it really shaped me into the person I am today, and I'm forever grateful for them.
Now, were you as good as the broom guys today? Like the broom guys that wipe up the sweat today, they're pretty quick. Like what was your broom time?
Yeah, so I'm so old, we actually did not have that technology.
Oh, you just use a towel?
Yeah, we would always, I mean, you had the manager stance. You had your DePaul shirt on and your matching shorts with the towel over your shoulder. And we didn't have any fancy broom to wipe up the sweat off the ground. We had to get right back down to our knees and wipe it off by hand. So it was not, we didn't have the speed that the guys have nowadays. It's certainly
you were living the rough life, VHS and towels on the floor, crawling on the floor.
Yeah, I think I dated myself a little bit with some of those manager explanations. So
All right. So then you go through that whole process as a manager. Kind of what made you decide to go to the high school level instead of the college route, right? Because you're kind of in that zone as a manager. Maybe you move up as a lower level assistant, right? You kind of go through that level college wise, or you're getting your degree, things like that. So what made you just made that decision for you?
Well, I've been wanting to be a coach since I was 8 years old. My dad was a coach. When my brothers and I would play basketball out in the driveway, certainly I would play, but I would also pretend that I was the coach as well. It's something I always wanted to be. My 8th grade yearbook predicted that would be my future profession, basketball coach. But even though I wanted to be a coach from a young age, I wasn't quite sure what level I wanted to pursue it at. And so when I was a manager at DePaul, excuse me, I certainly really enjoyed being a part of the college game. I love traveling. I got to sit on the bench for 2 NCAA tournament games. Coolest experience ever. But then I was also studying education, starting to be a social studies teacher. And when I did my student teaching my senior year, I absolutely fell in love with teaching. And to me, it kind of married the two things that I enjoy the most professionally, teaching and coaching. And to be honest, it's really one and the same. I teach social studies during the day, and I teach basketball after school in the gym. And so that's something I really was drawn to. The second thing that really kind of made me choose to pursue high school over college was I saw how much the guys that were coaching were on the road. And I wanted a situation that was maybe a little bit more feasible to have a family. And the third thing that really drew me to high school was the fact that I felt like at that age, at the age that our players are in at high school, that I could have a really, really great opportunity to have an impact on their lives and their overall development as young people. And finally, I really, really looked at the opportunity to develop a program, to have multiple levels, and to develop that comprehensive program that student athletes, enter freshman year and work their way through the varsity and those different levels. I really was drawn to that aspect of program building as well.
So kind of to build on that, you and I were kind of having this conversation off air a little bit yesterday, but you were an assistant at a few places, Niles West and Vernon Hills and Deerfield and obviously St. Pat's. What were some of the things you kind of learned at each stop that you kind of still use today? And then maybe just a lesson or so, because you worked for 4 great head coaches there, maybe a lesson or two from one or two of them.
Yeah, I've been very, very lucky. In my 20 years coaching, I've been able to have a diverse amount of experiences. I worked for different coaches that had different styles and different situations at different schools. And I was very, very lucky to do that. And I took away a ton from each experience, whether it was coaching AAU or junior high basketball or working at these different high schools. My first high school coaching job, I started coaching when I was a senior in high school, but my first high school coaching job was at Deerfield High School, my alma mater, when I was a freshman in college. So I was working with kids that were my classmates and were my friends. So it was a unique situation. And it was also unique in the sense that, Deerfield had a legendary coach, someone that has served as a mentor to me, someone that was a true inspiration to me. And his name was Steve Pappas. We actually play in a shootout at DePaul Prep every single year in his honor since he passed away about 15 years ago. And the year I started coaching was the year after he retired. So it was really interesting seeing a program being kind of taken over by a new coach following a legendary coach. And I learned a lot of lessons through that experience. And also the program was kind of in a little bit of a downturn. And it was also interesting how our coaching and our coaching staff ended up having to manage those expectations and how they had kind of changed over the years and trying to build that program back up. It was also really a crash course in X's and O's. I learned how to teach motion offense and man-to-man defense, a lot of stuff that, I didn't necessarily see the teaching end of it growing up as a player and an aspiring coach. So I learned some really valuable lessons in that regard. And then when I was student teaching, I student taught at Niles West. So I ended up volunteering there for 1 year with the varsity. And I got to learn from a guy named Josh Grant, who played in the NBA, played for Rick Majerus over at Utah, and coached at Lake Forest before he went to Niles West. And he had a different view of the game, taught it differently, different strategies, different X's and O's, different teaching points. And I was able to be a sponge in terms of learning that different perspective as well. I also learned about time management while I was student teaching and coaching at Niles West. I was also coaching junior high basketball at Daniel Wright in Lincolnshire. I was working with the Deerfield feeder program as an assistant and coached AAU. So sometimes I would coach 3 practices in a day. And it was awesome, but I really learned how to manage my time. And obviously as a head coach, that's extremely important. Then I went to Vernon Hills and I was there for 2 years as a head freshman coach. And that was the first time at the high school level I was able to lead my own team. I certainly coached my own travel teams, but that was my first experience leading my own level as a level head coach. And so there's a lot of learning through that experience, but I also got to assist the varsity a lot as well. And Matt McCarty over there at Vernon Hills, he's still the coach. He's fantastic. Through him, I learned the power of positive coaching, the importance of relationship building, certainly a different perspective on X's and O's as well. And also, he really got me going in terms of putting together scouting reports. It was my first experience of kind of taking the lead in terms of scouting certain opponents. And that was certainly something that really was beneficial for me, but also was something that I learned to really love about coaching, game planning and scouting reports. And then I ended up at St. Pat's for 8 years. I taught social studies there, and I was an assistant coach under Mike Bailey, who is an absolute legend in coaching. He's one of my best friends. And even though I'm a little biased, I truly believe that he is one of, if not the best coaches around. Learning from a legend was interesting. It was a totally different experience. The level of competition and the rivalry games and the expectations that we had at St. Pat's were all new to me when I first got there. When I worked at St. Pat's, I did double duty. My first 2 years, I coached the freshmen and assisted with the varsity. And my last 6 years, I was the head sophomore coach and coached the varsity. So every single day, 4 to 5 hours of practice, 2 games a night on game days. It was really a clinic in how to run a program and how to build a successful program. Coach Bailey also taught me the fine details and how important being detail oriented really is, and how you can mash together teaching and coaching as one. He's one of the best teachers of the games that I really have ever been around. Fantastic. But the other thing that he really helped me with big time was the administrative side of coaching. Excuse me. I thought that coaching was what you did at practice and what you did during the games, but he really taught me the behind the scenes stuff, putting together schedules, communicating with families, talking with players, working on the academic side of things. I really learned a lot about the administrative side of coaching through him, and he really put me in a position to do a lot of those things. So when I became a head coach, I was able to step right in. But probably the biggest thing that he taught me was the importance of being a lifelong learner. I'll never forget, a couple years in, him and I go to clinics all the time together, still do. And we went to a clinic at Niles West High School, as an IBCA clinic. And we were there, a bunch of people, and speakers were great. And I'll never forget, Coach Bailey was there, 30 years coaching, taking notes feverishly. And there were a lot of new coaches that were in the stands that were just watching, not even taking a note. And here's this guy who had accomplished just about everything as a coach, known in coaching circles as one of the best, still taking notes and trying to learn. And so what that taught me is that as long as I'm going to be a coach, I am always going to try to get better and always try to learn as much as I can.
All right. So I want to go a little bit off script here, because you had a lot of great stuff there, but something that piqued my interest, coaching with someone who played for Rick Majerus. Rick Majerus is known as one of the best coaches around. People use his stuff today. He's still got a tree, right? What were some of those things of the Majerus style that you learned there? Because he wasn't always, I guess, traditional, right? He had his very distinct way of doing things, right? And he thought this is how we're gonna do it. Maybe wasn't always the same as, I guess you say traditional coaching in air quotes.
Yeah, I think I only spent 1 year at Niles West, but I think the biggest takeaway from the Majerus family of coaches that included Josh Grant was the way that he taught motion offense. And I think one of the best old school motion teaching films that's out there is actually done by Rick Majerus. And so Josh would teach motion offense really well. And he would teach players to learn how to read the defense and react to their teammates and not be robotic. He taught them decision making. And a lot of that process, Coach Grant learned from Coach Majerus.
All right, so moving on here, we're doing a little compare and contrast, right? You've coached at large public schools, large private schools. Later on, we're going to talk about kind of the coaching changes, things like that. So I think this is a useful topic for maybe some of our listeners who may be looking for jobs other places or applying for positions. So talk about, public school, private school experience, some of the great things, and then maybe some of the challenges on each side.
In the first thing that comes to mind to me is coaching, and kids are kids. And I think, there's a lot of similarities between working at and coaching at a private school versus a public school. You still got to build a program culture. You still got to have an identity. It's still about teaching and relationship building and making those connections with the kids. In terms of the differences, obviously the biggest difference is the faith component. At a private school, faith becomes at the center of a lot of the things that you do. You pray before and after games. You go on retreats with your team, service opportunities, the mission of the school. Like at St. Ignatius, our mission is really deeply rooted in the Catholic faith. So, for example, the Jesuit priests that run our school believe in something called cura personalis, which is a Latin phrase for the whole person. And everything we do is kind of centered at trying to develop the whole person, whether it's academically, socially, spiritually, athletically, extracurricular wise, and so forth. So certainly the faith aspect is different. But in terms of like a technical standpoint and running a program, there are some differences. And I think oftentimes, people, if you don't live in both worlds and if you haven't experienced both, you don't quite understand the differences, and that there are pros and cons to being in both situations. Like, for example, you're coaching at a public school. You only have a few schools that maybe feed into your high school, but there's some benefits to that. Kids grow up playing together. They know each other, they're friends, there's familiarity. Oftentimes there's a feeder program that introduces the high school concepts to the kids at a young age. High school coaches have a general idea knowing who's going to be coming into their high school, and those kids have the general idea of knowing who they're going to high school with. So there's a lot of benefits in that regard to having a program where a lot of kids have played together since they were in 4th or 5th grade. Certainly at a private school, you don't get that. Oftentimes you have kids who come in freshman year, and it's the first time not only that they've even played with their teammates, but it's the first time they've even ever met them. And so it could take a little bit longer for those kids to gel, to develop that chemistry, and for you to implement your system, since a lot of the concepts you're teaching them might be the first time they've ever seen it when they walk into the door freshman year. Obviously, there's a benefit in terms of, not having boundaries, and kids could come from a lot of different grammar schools, and there's a wider pool that really feeds into your high school. So, I think when you're looking at both situations, as a young coach, if you're maybe pursuing a job, I would certainly find out what's the best fit for you personally and professionally, because like I said, there's benefits to working at both types of schools as a coach.
Yes, I think you missed the major difference, and the major difference is the money, but that's a different problem.
Yeah, that certainly comes into play, especially the retirement part. I don't know if I'll ever want to retire. I say that now, in my late 30s, but I don't know if I'll ever want to retire. But for me, and for anyone I think that does it, even if you're at a public school, the amount of hours that we put in versus the amount that we're paid, it truly is a labor of love, and it's a vocation. And me personally, it's something that I would do for free if I had to. Don't tell anyone that, because I still like getting my stipend, but still, no, I would do it for free. It's like I said, an absolute labor of love, and it's something that you have to be passionate about if you want to do it.
For sure. So I know this is another topic that I know is important to you, and it's important to me, and it's important to Todd. But you are on the executive board of the IBCA, and we've had multiple members of the IBCA board, whether it's Jim Tracy or others, just to kind of talk about that organization. But from your standpoint, I think you offer a unique vantage point. For you, why was it important for you to get involved that majorly in the state's Coaches Association at such a young age? I can speak from personal experience. There's often times where I'll come to a meeting and you and I are there, and we're quite often the youngest two in the room. So, for you, why was that so important to get involved early, and kind of what are your goals for the organization?
Yeah, when I first started coaching, my dad was a coach, like I mentioned. And so he would bring me to coaches clinics all over the place. I mean, I remember one time going to Connecticut to watch a Nike Elite clinic. So one of the things that I would do a lot early on is I would go to the local coaches clinics, and a lot of them were run by the IBCA. And I remember to go to the clinic, you had to be a member. So I must have been 18 years old, and my dad got me all signed up to be a member of the IBCA. So I would always get the quarterly newsletters from Coach Rolinski, who was the founder and the leader of the IBCA for so long. And I always wanted to stay connected. And I always saw on those letterheads that would go out, all the leaders in coaching, the district reps, the executive board members would all be listed on that letterhead. And I thought that was a really cool thing to not only be able to be a coach, but to be a leader within your profession and a voice to help other coaches. And so when I was at St. Pat's, I was still an IBCA member for a long time. But when I was at St. Pat's, Coach Bailey was heavily involved. He's been a president with the IBCA, a vice president, and now he's currently the associate executive director. So must have been my second or third year. I have a little bit of a background in technology. So the IBCA needed a little bit of help with their website. And I jumped at the opportunity to help them out. And as time went on, and I got to develop those relationships with other members of the IBCA, and I got more comfortable and more confident, I really started to try to take on more and more of a leadership role within the organization. And I think it's really important. Coaches, we have a unique job, and we are in a really great fraternity that really is closely connected and supports one another. And I love advocating for other coaches and advocating for the growth of our game. And it's a responsibility that I really take seriously and I really, really enjoy. There's a lot of things that we're working on as an organization. There's a lot of benefits to being an organization. Certainly, there's a lot of things that we do in terms of honoring coaches. We have our all-star games, our all-state teams for players, our Coach of the Year awards, our Hall of Fame, our milestone awards, our Hall of Fame banquet. All that stuff's great. And we really enjoy being able to celebrate the amazing accomplishments of our peers. But also a big responsibility of ours is, like I mentioned earlier, trying to grow the game, working on supporting coaches, setting up mentorship programs, connecting coaches, developing relationships across the state with coaches of all different levels and all different experience levels. So it is something that I really enjoy, and it's an organization that I'm really passionate about, and I think does so much good for our game across the state. We're actually honoring or celebrating our 50th year as a organization this year. So there's a lot of cool stuff that we've gone back and looked at in terms of looking at the impact of the IBCA over the years.
All right, so I'm gonna get to the mentor thing in a moment, because I know that's a big thing for you and me. But I want to kind of just touch a little bit, because I know you are one of our representatives that kind of attends the national coaches conference yearly as well. So the first part of this question is for you, and I'm sure the shot clock will get mentioned in this conversation, but what are some of the trends or things you could see within our state for just the game of basketball, boys and girls, over the next, let's say, 10 years?
There's a lot of opportunities, I think, for the game to grow over the next 5 years. And there's also some threats to the game as well that we can experience and that hopefully we can try to avoid. In terms of growth opportunities, obviously the shot clock is one of them. More and more states seem to be adopting the shot clock. The National Federation of High Schools gave states a choice whether or not they use it, which is a huge step in the right direction. Obviously, there's arguments for both sides of it. I think when we're looking at the shot clock, a lot of the problems with it would be finding people to operate it and the cost of it. Though certainly a lot of the other states that have adopted the shot clock have found solutions to those issues. And a lot of the coaches in those states, at least the ones that are represented at our conference for the NHS BCA, have come back with some pretty positive reviews about implementing it. Even the guys and girls that weren't necessarily in favor of it from the beginning have said some pretty positive things about it. I think the game has really grown and continues to grow in terms of what players and teams can do. It's really quite amazing seeing how skilled players have become and how adept they have been at adjusting to the changes in the game. I think the game is more exciting to watch now more than ever, really. And a lot of that has to do with how skilled the players are and how competitive the coaches have been and how creative everyone has been to try to win games and try to be the best. So there's so many things that have been growing within our game that are awesome, but there's a lot of threats that really can get in the way of the development of basketball. Not in any particular order, but first and foremost, turnover in coaching has really been alarming the last couple of years. And it's not something that we just see in the state of Illinois. When we go to our national conference every July, this is something that's going on really all throughout the country. There's a lot of reasons behind the coach turnover. At least my theory and a lot of what others have said in other states, really it comes down to 4 different things. Number one, and we'll get into mentorship, but a lot of coaches are finding themselves in a position where they don't have good mentors. They don't have someone that they can rely on for advice, someone that is invested in them, but not in the thick of it with them. So mentorship hopefully is something that our organization and coaches organizations all across the country can really invest in to help coaches in terms of their longevity. The second thing is a lot of coaches are getting jobs at a really young age without a lot of experience. I know everyone on this call, we've certainly spent a lot of time as assistant coaches before we became head coaches, and that certainly helped prepare us for that transition. And certainly if coaches get jobs too soon and they don't have mentors, when they get into difficult situations or there's a question that they don't have an answer to, it could be a little bit more difficult to navigate. The third thing that's really hurting coaching longevity is issues in terms of parent pressures. And in some cases, this is not the situation everywhere, but in some situations, also a lack of administrative support. And so oftentimes coaches who spend so much time away from their families, spending hours and hours each day growing their program, trying to invest in their kids, when they see that all of that time being spent is resulting in more and more issues, tough things that they have to navigate, certainly coaches begin to question whether or not the profession is the right thing for them. And then the fourth thing I think is really new is COVID. I think a lot of coaches spent a lot of time at home during the holidays, during Thanksgiving and Christmas, and they ended up seeing what it was like being home during the holidays with their family, especially those with younger families. So I think longevity in coaching, turnover in coaching is certainly a threat to the development of the game of basketball. I think the next thing is a official shortage. There's been talk for a lot of years about a lot of great officials retiring and not as many young officials coming in that is absolutely needed to continue on, I guess, the legacy of those older, more experienced officials. So hopefully the official shortage is something that we can help fix in terms of promoting the benefits of being an official and recruiting young, new officials to the game. So I think those are all kind of things that are certainly strengths and opportunities in basketball in the next 5 years, but also threats to the growth of the game as well.
So here's an interesting, just a twist to this is, for you, is there something that other states do that maybe you wish Illinois did as far as the game?
Well, for me personally, shot clock is right up there. I mean, a lot of the states that we've talked to that have just implemented the shot clock, like I said, absolutely love it. A couple of my friends from Georgia are super excited about them recently implementing it, for example, and they speak really highly of it. So that's one thing. But to be honest, this is going to sound like I'm a little bit biased, but I guess I am. I think in Illinois, we do a lot of really good things. And I think there's so much to celebrate. Certainly it's not perfect. And there are a lot of things that we continue to really need to look at developing and growing. But I do think Illinois does overall a really good job of growing the game of basketball. But certainly other states with the shot clock, for sure. Other states have talked about the mentorship programs that they're starting as well, that we're hoping to duplicate here.
All right. Maybe let's get into since we're on the topic of Illinois, a very controversial topic in Illinois of where the state championship games are held. right? You go back and forth, right? You look at some of the higher divisions. John and I had talked about this in, what was it, February, right? Looking at
and I think we were asked by the coach of Amundsen girls. He was asking us questions about it on in the show.
Right. You look at a lot of the maybe 3A, 4A, and a lot of the teams come from Chicago and the Chicago area, right? Just because there's not a lot of teams. So, they combined it, they're playing everything. We had, right, at least on the girls' side, we had the third place game, and maybe it was later, so I guess what is the process and the ongoing conversations on that, and kind of trying to find the right balance for everybody, because it's obviously tough to accommodate teams downstate and teams from the Chicago area. So I guess that's maybe one of the more controversial topics besides the shot clock in the state of Illinois.
I think Illinois is a really unique state. Number one, because of our size, we're a big state geographically, but also because I think we're many different communities in terms of, what people want and what they need and what they expect. So, for example, if you're coaching in downstate Illinois and you're coaching at a small school, your motivations, your needs, what you want is going to be different oftentimes from maybe someone coaching at a big school in the city. And that's actually one of the challenges that we face, in our organization, the IBCA, is making sure that everybody feels and everybody is represented the best they possibly can be. When it comes to the state tournament, I know I'm a part of a committee that meets with the IHSA a couple of times every single year. And I know they feel the same way. They want to make sure that they try to serve as many people in such a diverse state as they possibly can. So it was really important for them to continue to have a state tournament that was more centrally located, that people from all over the state can access. Now, certainly you go to Peoria, you go to Champaign, you go to Bloomington, it's closer for some people than it is for others, but they felt that at least it's as centrally located as it possibly can be. Now, moving to the new format this year has certainly been controversial, right, Todd? In terms of the setup and the days and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I do know that the IHSA put a lot of time and effort into it, and it wasn't perfect. And I know that they're taking a lot of suggestions in terms of how to make it better. For me personally, I was very, very lucky that my team was able to earn a spot downstate in the first year that they did it in Champaign. And I will tell you that we had a tremendous experience. It was awesome. It was so cool for our kids to be able to play at State Farm Center on U of I's court. The tournament we thought was well run. It was well attended, especially in the earlier games. And it was a great experience for everyone, something that we're really never going to forget for the rest of our lives. It didn't come without hiccup. I mean, we lost in the Final Four game against eventual state champion Sacred Heart Griffin, and we had a quick turnaround. We ended up having to come back and play our third place game later that day against Simeon. And logistically, that was kind of tough too. So there are some logistical issues I think that the IHSA is going to continue to iron out over the years, hopefully with a lot of coach feedback. Hopefully the IBCA can be a voice for coaches in the state of Illinois to bring to the IHSA the changes that our coaches want. But I do know that overall, I think the reception of holding all 4 classes in the same weekend was pretty positive, especially on Championship Saturday, even if you had some logistical
really cool
issues with the Final Four and third place games.
How about that, John? You get Sacred Heart Griffin, then hey, here's Simeon.
Yeah, you lost.
No, you lost. Hey, here's Simeon.
It was interesting, but it was, you know what, you get down there and it's like, no matter what you do, you win the game, you lose the game, you're going to play one of the best teams in the state. And we tried our best to plan ahead. And so we had our scouts done on both Simeon and Metamora before we played Sacred Heart Griffin, because that turnaround was way too quick. And
I get, not that, obviously we have huddle and all those things now, but at least Simeon's in the city, right? You know them, you kind of, you see them, right? You have a pretty good idea of what Simeon is going to do. So that maybe makes it a little bit easier, but in theory, I guess, right? In theory, maybe not in practice.
Yeah, in theory. And we actually, just to be safe, I started collecting film on opponents from all throughout the states. right around the beginning of January, kind of looking where all the sectional seatings shaped up. So we tried our best to be as forward thinking as possible. But certainly, you don't know until you know who you're playing that next game.
Look, he sounds like he beat me to some state tapes.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're talking to the right guy about collecting film, the king of film collection.
Yep.
As we were talking, I was thinking of just some interesting, just follow-up interesting scenarios. So for example, in the 3A Girls State Championship, two teams from the same conference played. In the 4A Girls State Championship, it was two teams, Stevenson and Bennett, that are within 10 miles of each other, but they go down and they play at Redbird Arena. So, I wonder too, eventually, if they're, and I understand the geographical things of a sectional, but I also wonder if there will ever be a way to look at it. So, for example, like in my sectional, 3 of my conference opponents are with me. I know in Todd's sectional, in Todd plays in the East Suburban, where you obviously came from Pat's. In the East Suburban Girls Catholic League, if you look, almost all of them win a sectional. So, I wonder, if there ever will be a discussion of maybe how to move that around a little bit as well.
Yeah, I think there is. We, as an organization for the IBCA, went down to meet with the IHSA a couple of years ago, right before the pandemic, because we were interested in seeing how they decided who was going to play in what sectional. And Kurt Gibson and Beth Sauser, our two boys and girls basketball moderators, ended up sharing their computer screen, and they had a map that had, it really looked like a pretty complex math equation, geometry, which I was not good at. And there were lines and highlighted cities and all sorts of stuff on this map. And they were trying to connect it kind of like a spider web. And it looked pretty complicated, but certainly, I think there's room for improvement. Having two conference teams play each other downstate is certainly not ideal. I think a lot of it has to do with geography and school size, and every class is way different. I mean, if you go to 4A down south, you might have a regional opponent that's 2 hours away, whereas you're in 4A up on the north side of the city and you're playing schools that you already played. So I think there's probably no easy way to do it, but I certainly think that we need to continue to bring suggestions to the IHSA about stuff that works for coaches, and more importantly, stuff that works out for our kids.
So I do. Before we kind of just move on to some other things, I wanted to really talk about the mentor program. And I know that was the number one thing you kind of brought up in your point about, why coaches are leaving at such a young age. I guess, in your mind, why is that so important? I mean, I know Todd and you and we can name our mentors off the top of our head for sure. I've had many conversations with Bailey myself. But why is that so important to you, and what would your goal be?
Well, like you mentioned, I think all of us could, name our mentors and the people that have been so important in our lives and in our coaching career. And just speaking from personal experience, I've been a head coach now for 6 years, and I've been a coach now for 20. And, I love this profession. I wouldn't want to do anything else, but it's not always easy. Especially when you move into the role of a head coach. You succeed and you fail in a very public way, and every decision you make is scrutinized by everybody watching, because most people have either played the game or are fans of the game. So, those are challenges, that present itself to every single coach. And I think it's important to have somebody that is experienced, that is invested in you, but isn't in the thick of the day-to-day activities that you are in, to be a sounding board for you. I'm very lucky. I have Coach Bailey, Jim Tracy at St. Lawrence, obviously leader of our IBCA. Those two guys, for example, Coach McKenna, Hall of Fame girls coach at St. Ignatius. These are all people that have been really important to me in terms of my development as a coach, and have also been a tremendous support structure in place when I needed help, or I needed an idea, or I needed to have validation for a decision that I was about to make. I think having them there really has been instrumental in terms of, making sure that I am making the right decisions, but also making sure that I feel supported. Because sometimes being a head coach can be a lonely job. You work with incredible people. I mean, I have a coaching staff that's amazing that I think are really all, some of my closest friends. But at the end of the day, as a head coach, everything falls on you. And so having that outside support is invaluable to help you navigate those difficult times and to stay the course and stay positive. So the importance of having a good mentor, I think, is well established. And, it's not just in coaching, it's really in any walk of life. So as an organization, the IBCA is trying to find ways that we can create a program that's set up to help mentor people that maybe don't have natural mentors in their lives, that maybe aren't as lucky as the three of us and so many others that have those experienced coaches to turn to. And so we're in the process of putting together what this looks like. We've contacted coaches from all over the state, from different backgrounds with different specialties and expertise and different experience levels. And hopefully in the next year or so, we'll be able to roll out this program so that if someone has a question about leadership, about captains, about scheduling, about the 1-2-2 ball press, about how to navigate a difficult issue with playing time, whatever the case may be, hopefully we'll have people in place that are experts in those areas so that people who are in coaching have someone that they can turn to that maybe they otherwise didn't.
And I think that's a tremendous point.
Agreed.
Just in general, I Coach Raven at St. Viator, John actually hired me. We pick our chest brains, but like for me, basketball wise, I was more a baseball guy. I did college baseball and things like that. So I took my coaching mentorship from that side. But like, I'll even translate to the podcast here. Like, just by doing this podcast,
I was thinking the same thing.
So many great people that we made connections with.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be. It's just somebody you can be like, hey, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about this? Or have you ever had this? Just to have somebody to bounce those questions off of it is so important for a young coach and an experienced coach, right? Like, you mentioned COVID and the changing landscape of coaching. Well, there's a lot of things now that maybe you're like, I don't know, like this has never happened before. So you try to get the experience of other coaches and ideas and combine them together and make the best plan you can. So
yeah, absolutely.
I'll go ahead.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I think, looking at, some of these situations that we've been presented with the last couple of years, dealing with COVID, none of us have been through this, but a lot of us have been lucky to have others to bounce ideas off of, even in these unprecedented times. I remember trying to put together, I think they told us on a Friday last year that we're going to start on Monday. Right. And I remember calling a bunch of people, hey, what are you doing? What's the plan? How are you going to ease the kids into this? Yeah. Another example is, we're going downstate and we win our super sectional game on a Monday, and then we're beginning plans Tuesday morning for our trip downstate on Thursday. So I was very lucky to be able to call coaches that had gone downstate, like Coach Slaughter, Coach Bros, Coach Kleinschmidt, Coach Heidkamp, a lot of different, coaches that had experienced that before. And they helped me navigate some of that unprecedented stuff that I had to deal with, stuff that was new to me. So I agree with you. I think mentorship is absolutely key. And hopefully it's something that we can provide to people that might not necessarily be lucky enough to have them.
All right, let's let you hype your program a little bit. You mentioned your state run last year. Take us through the year and maybe some key steps along the way, right? Like, obviously, you have a pretty good squad coming in. You have your expectations, you have your plans. But I guess the first question is like, what were your key steps along the way? Maybe a game where you're like, okay, yeah, we're getting there. Because every year there's you have a good team and you can do it, but you need a little luck along the way. You need, right? That's how you get to a state championship. Unless you're the most, you have some NBA team or whatever. But what were some of your key steps throughout the year that, as you were going, thought, yeah, we're getting there. We can make a run at this.
I think really the process began 2 years ago. Right before COVID hit, we had one of our best teams, the best team that we had up to that point since I was a coach at Ignatius. It was my 4th year there, and we had a fantastic team. We finished 24-9, and we ended up winning a sectional semifinal game at the buzzer to advance to the Sweet 16. And then the season was canceled by COVID. And a lot of our seniors, a number of our seniors this year were sophomores on that team. And the following year, we had pretty high expectations, but just like every other coach and every other program and every other player in the state, we didn't get an opportunity to play in a state tournament. We certainly were very thankful that we were able to have our season, but we longed for the opportunity to compete in the playoffs. So once we got into this preseason leading up to this year, we were really excited. We were really excited about the team we had coming back. We were really excited about the opportunity to have a full season and to be able to compete in the playoffs. And more importantly, we were really excited to go to war alongside such a good group of guys. And when we got into the fall, leading up to the start of the season, we knew expectations were really high. Probably the highest expectations have ever been for our basketball program at our school. I think in the Sun Times, we started the season ranked number 4 in the preseason top 25. So we had high expectations, and we also had big goals for ourselves. And we knew that it wouldn't be easy. We loaded up our schedule to try to challenge ourselves the best we could, to try to see a wide variety of opponents and systems so that we would be prepared come state tournament time. When we started the season, I think those expectations got to us a little bit. We had a couple of early season losses. I think we started the season 3-4, and it was a little tough on our guys. It was a little bit of a dose of reality that our road to our goals wasn't necessarily going to be easy. Then all of a sudden, we started playing our best basketball. We had a couple of huge wins. We were really hitting our stride in the middle of December, and then COVID hit our program and we had to shut down, and we ended up missing about 10 days of practice, and we did not play games for about 16 days. And when we came back together, it was like we started the season over. We had to do conditioning again. We had to remember all of our plays or remember the way that we played. It was basically like the first day of practice. And when we competed over Christmas break, we stumbled a few times, and it was tough. It was tough, especially with the high preseason expectations. And we ended up entering our most difficult stretch of games in our Catholic League schedule, 8-7. And I'll never forget, there was a moment we were playing Brother Rice. They were a top 7 team in the state, and we were 8-7, had struggled a little bit, been up and down, and kind of didn't really hit our full stride yet. And we had a fantastic game against them, and we ended up losing at the buzzer. And there's no moral victories, especially in the Catholic League, but our guys in the locker room after, they started to really believe, and they started to feel more confident. And we ended up going on a really huge stretch where we ended up beating Bolingbrook the next day, ended up beating Mount Carmel for their first loss, and a couple other schools. DePaul Prep won our Jesuit Cup. All fantastic programs with outstanding teams. And that really helped us build our confidence. After that stretch, we dealt with some injuries, and we dropped a couple of games that maybe we were favored to win. And the coaches that coached against us, the players that competed against us in those games, they certainly earned those victories. But what really stood out to me is when we stumbled again later on in the season, the lessons that we learned from the beginning of the season, how to stick together, the importance of perseverance through adversity, the importance of continuing to just focus on being the best versions of yourself every single day, living in the moment and playing present. All those experiences that we dealt with earlier helped us navigate those stumbles that we had later on in the season. And I think those experiences served us well. We had talked a lot going into the playoffs and really throughout the entire season that everything that we learned together, our successes, but more importantly, the moments we fell short, those moments we fell short were going to be the reason why we were going to be successful later on. And I think we took those lessons and really applied them to go on a nice run in the playoffs. And it was, like I said, an incredible experience. And, to be honest, handling adversity and going through a little bit of ups and downs and dealing with difficult situations, especially at the beginning of the year, it could not have been possible unless we had a group of dedicated coaches on our staff that always bought in, that always promoted a unified message. And that doesn't happen if we don't have a fantastic group of young men that cared about the program, loved our team, and played for one another. And that was a special group that persevered. And the story of that group, I think, from now until I'm done coaching, will always be a story of perseverance and togetherness and never losing sight of what your ultimate goal is.
All right, so let's transition going forward, right? You made that state run. You're going in the next year. Two-part question here. What are your goals going forward into next year? And then how does that translate into preparing for summer, right? Because everybody's like, oh, the season's over, we got some time, and you look up and it's April, gonna be May, and oh wait, it's summer camp, right? So, what are your goals, and then translate them to summer.
In case anyone wanted to know, it's 45 days till summer camp, but I'm not that I'm
well, nobody's counting. We're all counting, but nobody's counting.
Can't wait, actually. Yeah, really there, as coaches, obviously things die down in the off season a little bit, but there's never time off. As you guys know, it's a year round thing, always trying to build your program and serve the kids. But Todd, I think that's a really good question. What's interesting to me is, the last 6 years building our program has been a process, and it's been something that we've always kind of worked towards an end goal. And that was to get downstate. Now, the next chapter in our program is how do we maintain that level of success? How do we continue on that culture? And how do we even try to grow it even more? And so I think, amongst our coaches and definitely amongst our players in our program, there's a hunger to continue on the legacy of the guys that graduated before them, to continue on what we achieved this year and to do it again and to try to go even further. I was talking with one of our guys who was a freshman on our team this year. His name is Phoenix. And one of the things that he mentioned to me was, Coach, I want to go downstate every single year. So certainly I think, once we got the taste of going to Champaign and having a great year the last couple of years, the kids want to do it again. And I know that they're hungry to do so. And they're working hard on their own in the off season to be prepared for us to start June and hopefully start off strong. In terms of preparation, I mean, you guys know, it's kind of a balance of wrapping up the past year and preparing for next year. I meet with every single kid in our program, freshmen through seniors, managers, players, to talk about their experiences. So I'm just wrapping those meetings up, and certainly reviewing all of our film, putting together teaching reels and highlight videos for our kids, but also, put our schedule together for next year, trying to put our June schedule together so that we are seeing a high level of competition, so that we are seeing a variety of teams and that our kids have an opportunity to develop as much as they can at our camp and also to be challenged in those summer league games. So it's something that we're super excited about. I think our kids learns a ton of valuable lessons themselves and from the people that came before them in our program. And I think they're ready, willing, and able to try to accomplish some great things next year too.
If only it was easy as the freshman exuberance of, yeah, we're going to go downstate every year.
Coach, I want to do it every year.
Yeah, I loved it. Hey, you never know, but yeah, I love that spirit for sure. It's kind of funny when, you first start out coaching, you think to yourself, man, I just want to be a head coach. And then you become a head coach and now you want more. Now you want to be a successful head coach. You think to yourself, man, I just want to go downstate. And then you get there and you're like, I want to win. I want to win the state championship. I want to come down again. I want to do this again. So it's certainly a fun progression and an exciting challenge. I think it's one thing building your program to get to a certain level, and then it's another thing trying to maintain that. So it's certainly a challenge that we're looking forward to, and it should be exciting. Should be fun.
All right. So Todd and I love when people tell their stories and their elements. So before I move into the 30-second timeout, I wouldn't be a good podcast host if I didn't ask, in your state run, you're in your super sectional game, you're playing to go downstate, and you're playing your mentor. How was that experience?
It was unique. There's a couple of parts that were unique to it. Number one, obviously the love and respect I have for Coach Bailey and for everyone in the St. Patrick community. Before the game, I got a ton of texts from, friends that taught there, former players, parents, board members. I mean, you name it, telling me they were proud of me and congratulations on getting there. They did not wish me luck in the game, but they were so gracious and so caring. And so I got to see a lot of them even right before tip. So that was a unique situation for sure. And then the other thing is, Coach Bailey is someone that is one of my best friends and my mentor. So it certainly was unique in that sense. And the other thing that was kind of interesting is the last time St. Pat's went to a super sectional, I was an assistant coach there. And it was in 2015 when we played St. Joe's. We lost by 1. St. Joe's ended up winning the state championship that year. And the game was at the same gym, at Hoffman Estates High School. So it was kind of surreal in that sense. But I also think that, the St. Pat staff and their players, our kids and our coaches, certainly there was some unique circumstances there. But at the end of the day, the goal was the same. We want to go downstate and we're going to do everything we can to win the game. And so once that tip off started and the game began, it was all business for our kids and for our coaches. And then obviously after, it was exciting for us, and the St. Pat's community couldn't have been any more gracious in terms of wishing us the best. And they're really, truly a special group of people. So it was unique, but it was exciting. And it was one of the coolest moments I've ever experienced in coaching, being able to have our kids win a game and celebrate getting to go downstate for the first time in school history. It's something I'll never forget. Most importantly, just the look of joy on everyone's faces. That's something that I'll probably always carry with me.
That is very cool.
I think if me and John ever played in a sectional state championship, it'd be hilarious for the fans because we'd be just calling out each other's stuff.
Well, yeah, that would
It'd just be going back and forth.
There'd be no scouting report considering our press break is literally called the same thing.
Yeah, we just call each other's plays for each other.
We have some of that, but after I left, St. Pat's kind of changed their offensive and defensive system. So it's a little bit more different than you would anticipate, though. Certainly, if you play against us or Pat's, Bennett, you play against Maine East maybe in the future with Sergio Murrow getting the job there. There's certainly some commonalities too that you'll see.
So as we move into our last 2 segments, this one we call 30-second timeout. This is kind of our opportunity to give the coach that were on with us just the platform to talk about whatever they want. It can be about their program, their family. We've had people talk about coaches' wives. We've had people turn the topic back on us and interview us, which we're never ready for. So that's always interesting. But it's your platform, your 30-second timeout. There's no referee in your timeout. So it's a loose 30. So, whatever you want to talk about, the floor is yours.
I was thinking about this a lot over the last couple of hours. And to me, the thing that I think I really wanted to just share, I read a fantastic book over one of the summers. I like to read a lot over the summer, and I read a book called Start With Why by Simon Sinek. And it's fantastic. And it really got me thinking about, our program and really me as a coach and also our players' experience. So one of the big things I would say to anyone taking over a program is to understand the mission of your program and have that mission drive every single thing that you do. Certainly as coaches, we know what we do. We coach basketball. We know how to do it. We all have our offensive and defensive philosophies, but sometimes I think we forget why we do it. At St. Ignatius, our driving force, our mission in our basketball program is our basketball program is bigger than basketball. Certainly, we want to win championships. We want to go downstate. We want to cut down nets. We want to win as many games as we can. We want to play at a high level. That's all part of it. But if that's all we're doing is winning championships and winning games, but we're not having a positive impact on the overall lives of every player and manager that comes through our program, then we're not doing our jobs. So having a mission, having a driving force like ours, our program's bigger than basketball, I think is really, really important. Understanding what your why is. Why do you coach? What is the purpose of your program? Going into our game against Simeon for the third place game in Champaign, there was a lot of emotions. Our guys were really disappointed that we lost a tough competitive game to Sacred Heart Griffin, and it was a quick turnaround for our guys. And one of the things I challenged them with was our program mission and understanding their own why. In the pregame huddle, I told them, I said, you guys need to remember why you played basketball, why you fell in love with the game, what drew you to the game of basketball. And you need to be that kid that fell in love with basketball when you go out there and you play Simeon. And I think when our kids really thought about that, I hope that it inspired them to really not just give their best effort, but to enjoy every single moment, to love it all. Speaking of, my last point on this would be, there's another good book by John Gordon called Carpenter. And it's a fantastic story. I don't know if you guys have read it. I love it. But the thing that really kind of stood out to me is one part of the book. He talks about really loving what you do. And if you love what you do, you got to love it all. You can't just love the good moments. You got to love certainly the successes. You got to love when things go well, but you also got to love when it doesn't. You got to love the challenges that are presented to you. You got to love the moments that aren't comfortable, because it's all part of what you love. And so for me, that's something I've always tried to live by. And it's something I think is good advice for anyone in getting into coaching. It's not easy, but if you love it all, you will never stop loving what you do.
All right, let's move into the quick hitters. Random stuff. We're just gonna throw it at you. Could be basketball, couldn't be. I don't know. We never know.
Well, we asked Ryan Gruber, because he's by Brookfield Zoo, what his favorite zoo animal was.
That's probably our best quick hitter question of all time.
I love that.
All right, so back for your AAU days. Funny or crazy AAU story? Everybody
I coached AAU for 12 years. I loved it. I got to coach some really, really good players, and that's kind of where I cut my teeth. But as you guys know, oh man, there are some great stories to tell. Probably the couple that really stick out to my mind. Number one, when I first started coaching, Jeffrey Jordan was on our team. He's a fantastic player. And we ended up going, must have been when he was in 8th grade, and we went to Orlando for nationals. And somehow, randomly, the AAU organizers decided that they were going to match us up on a Saturday night at 7:00 against a team called the D1 Greyhounds that OJ Mayo played on. And OJ Mayo was like, at that time, the next LeBron James. I mean, everyone was talking about him. And I'll never forget, the gym was packed. It was a big time atmosphere. And we were at the Milk House at the Wide World of Sports. I think they call it something different now at Disney. But that's also where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did their summer training. So halfway through the game, this was just a few years after I think they won the Super Bowl. Simeon Rice, for example, Warren Sapp, they came into the game and started watching. So it was literally one of the coolest atmospheres I ever saw. We lost, but it was a fantastic game. But it was a really cool thing to experience. One of the stories that I was actually just sharing with one of our parents the other day was, I never forget, we were playing, it's when I used to coach at Full Package Athletics, and we were playing at one of the rich high schools, and we were supposed to play at like 10 a.m. And at 3 a.m, I got an email and a phone call from the tournament director saying, no, your game's at 7. So I had to call everyone bright and early and wake them up. Yes. So they changed it 3 hours earlier, like 3 a.m. So we get everyone there miraculously. I don't even know how it actually happened, but we're playing the game on the side courts, and it was the first game of the day, and they had no lines. There was no out of bounds line. There was no free throw line. There was no 3-point line. So while we were playing, they started taping on the sidelines and the baseline. And during timeouts and stoppage of play, they were slowly filling in with tape the 3-point line and the free throw line. So by about, I don't know, the 3-minute mark left in the game, we actually had a full court to play on, which was fantastic. And probably the third story that I don't know why I always found this funny, but one time we had to play, so the locations you play in are so interesting sometimes when you go to these AU tournaments. And we were in Madison, Wisconsin, and we ended up playing at a site really in the attic of a church, and the court was carpeted. And the lines were painted in the carpet. It was great. But every time the ball bounced, it sounded like you were dribbling inside. And our kids weren't getting floor burns. They were getting rug burns every time they dove on a loose ball. So those are things that all kind of stood out as fun stories that I remember from my AAU coaching days.
Put it on the AAU bingo card.
Yeah, I like
Yes, AAU bingo is a fun follow. And
it is. It's a good follow.
And I'm sure,
because anybody who's coached AAU is like, yep.
Exactly. I was going to say, I'm sure that you guys are like, oh, I've seen that. Oh, I've seen that too.
Yep.
Like, for sure.
Yep.
All right. So this is what kind of one we added, and I like asking this one. Favorite or most unique gym you've coached in that's not Ignatius? So maybe another high school that you just think is cool or unique or you enjoy being in.
Well, obviously I'm lucky. I coach at a pretty cool school, and I was at St. Pat's, which is a fantastic gym as well. The best place I ever watched a game outside of that, I had this really talented player play for me for a number of years in AAU, Jeremy Richmond. He ended up going to Illinois for a little bit. And his junior year, his Waukegan team was playing Warren Township High School, and their best player, Brandon Paul, was also a kid that I coached in AAU. And so they're playing each other. I think it was a sectional final, and it was at Waukegan High School. And it was packed, standing room only. And Jeremy ended up hitting a half court buzzer beater to win the game to advance them to the Super. And it was literally the coolest high school experience I ever saw. You know, going back to a previous question, you asked me like college or high school, which way did you go? That was another defining moment for me. It was such a cool experience that I wanted to be a part of the high school game, but it was awesome. So the dog pound in Waukegan, certainly one of them. Yes. The dog pound in Waukegan, certainly one of them. I went to watch one of my friends coach his first game as a head coach. He was not the coach of the school, but I went to watch him play at Ottawa High School. That's a really cool gym as well. There's so many really neat downstate schools and really awesome gyms in the city too. So one of the cool things about coaching so long and coaching in different places is you get to see some of the coolest gyms around with great atmospheres.
All right. Favorite place to eat on the West Side? Where are you eating?
I mean, my school is right next to Taylor Street. So we're surrounded. We're right in Pilsen, Little Italy, Greektown, Chinatown's right there. I mean, we have the best places to eat. I'm sorry to say I've gained a lot of weight since I started working at St. Ignatius because of the amazing restaurants. I'd say my two favorite places would be an Italian place called Tefano's. It's fantastic. It's a walking distance from school. And also Greek Islands in Greektown are really my two favorite go-to places on the West Side.
I like Pompeii over there as well on Taylor Street. Pompeii is always good. And you know when a place is good when you see the Chicago cops eating there, then you know it's a good place.
Oh, absolutely. Pompeii, I think we cater pizza from them like at least every other week.
So we're just curious, you know, when you were watching the tournaments or now the NBA playoffs, what have been some of your things that you've taken away, maybe that you'll use or you thought was unique or a good idea or a good new concept or just some takeaways from both the tournament and the NBA playoffs so far?
You know, like I alluded to earlier, I try really hard to be a student of the game. Sometimes watching games isn't always for entertainment. Certainly I try to get into March Madness and the NBA playoffs a lot as a fan, but I'm sure you guys feel the same way. And just about every coach thinks this way is I end up watching it more to learn than to be a fan. And, you know, when you're looking at the game at the NBA level and at the college level, there's so many creative and fun things that are being done. And so I try to take as much as I can away from everything that I'm watching, like watching the NBA playoffs, for example. You're looking at the Bucks Bulls series, for example. They played 2 games. One of the things I like to look at is how teams defensively adjust to their opponent throughout the course of a series, because they get to know those, you know, their opponents better than anyone. They're playing them 3, 4, 5, 7 times potentially. And so seeing those adjustments they make game to game, to me, is really interesting because it helps me really think about adjustments that we can make within the game and throughout the course of a season. Twitter is like coaching heaven when it comes to devouring new sets and plays. There are a couple of different times where we maybe played a defense that we hadn't experienced before. And I was able to go back and steal a few sets that I had liked from the last couple of months being pulled from the NCAA, preseason games or the NBA, regular season games, whatever the case may be. So it was really helpful. But I always love finding creative new ways to teach the game, and watching the NCAA and NBA provides you those opportunities. Now, certainly not everything is applicable, but I do think that there are so many concepts that you can steal and use effectively at the high school level.
Yeah, my wife looks at me like I'm crazy. I'm sitting there like writing down, hey, 11:34 in the first of this game. I even get my daughter in it. I'm like, hey, write this down, And I think, like you said, like not all of it's applicable, but like sometimes the first part of a set, an action, like an entry action or something, is really like, oh yeah, that makes sense with what we do. You don't have to run the whole thing, right? Because NCAA, NBA gets really complicated after that, right? There's elaborate stuff, but yeah, I really like that. All right, so let's go to pregame meal or maybe a superstition you have.
Well, with the risk of sounding like I'm totally got these weird quirks, every time we have a game, I love to have Chinese food. I get Mongolian beef from ML Kitchen, except on Fridays during Lent, of course. And that's something that I do every single time we have a game. And my assistant coaches and the people I work with at school think that that's strange, but I don't know. It's just routine. But yeah, I mean, I think every coach has, pregame superstitions or in-game superstitions. Like I can't have anything in my pockets besides an expo marker and my game card. I have to clear my pockets before a game. I can only use the wooden dry erase boards. I cannot use the plastic ones for some odd reason. It just doesn't feel right to me. Before every single game, I certainly meet with my staff. We have our own little routines, who says what, who I meet with and what we put on the board. But before every single game, I cannot start coaching until I stand by the scores table right before the tip. I ask my team if they're ready, and I slap every player, coach, and manager's hands before the tip. So those are just a couple of things that I think are maybe some of my coaching quirks.
I like the Mongolian beef one. Now I want Mongolian beef. All right. So to finish, for you, Todd and I obviously have both been in the East Suburban a long time. Now you're in the Catholic League, as am I. What was your welcome to the Catholic League moment as a head coach?
I had two. Well, just like you mentioned, I was in the East Suburban for 8 years, and it is one of the best conferences in the state of Illinois. And we had at Pat so many incredible rivalry games and high quality, big time high school basketball that we played. So the transition over to the Catholic League was probably made easier because of that for me. But it certainly, became apparent early on that the Chicago Catholic League is certainly a beast when it comes to competition. I truly believe that we got the best conference in the state. We have outstanding coaches, really talented players, storied programs, great traditions, and tremendous atmospheres from gym to gym. The two moments that really stood out to me, my first year really kind of came through a success and also a failure. The first one came through a failure. We had played one of our big rivals on a Friday. It was our second conference game that I ever coached, and we got destroyed. And it wasn't even a game from the beginning. And it was in front of a packed house, and it was tough. It was a really hard loss, and we had to turn around and play another quality opponent just a couple of days later. And it became really apparent to me that there is no night off in the Catholic League. It is just super competitive. Even the teams that don't have the shiniest records are really good and super competitive and can knock teams off. So that was the first thing that was kind of a welcome to the CCL moment. The second one came through a success. We had ended up beating a team. It was maybe my third or fourth conference game I got to coach at our school. And we beat one of our rivals. We beat a team that really was favored over us at the last second in overtime. And I'll never forget, on my way home, the head coach of that school called me and congratulated me on that win. And it really demonstrated to me that the Chicago Catholic League coaches, while we compete against each other like crazy on the court, it really is a family. When we went downstate, when we suffered through tough losses, had big wins, I'm constantly getting texts from my friends in the Catholic League, Coach Kleinschmidt and Livatino, Coach Murphy over at Providence Catholic. I'm missing a million people, but the coaches in our league are really caring and supportive of one another and have a lot of pride in our league. And it really is a great fraternity to be a part of.
So, Coach Monroe, we knew this was going to be a great episode. I think there was about 4 guests that after talking to them, when we always ask for suggestions for new guests, I think 4 or 5 people said, you got to get Coach Monroe on. You got to get Coach Monroe on. So we knew this was going to be a great episode. We can't thank you enough for your time and willingness to be on and for everything you do for the state of Illinois for basketball.
Thanks. I appreciate it. I'm a big fan of your podcast. I live in Joliet and drive to the city, so I fill most of my commute by listening to basketball podcasts, and After the Timeout is right at the top. So thank you guys for all that you do. And it truly is an honor to be here. And I'm looking forward to listening to all the amazing guests you're going to have on in the future.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the After the Timeout podcast, hosted by Todd Zazadil and Jon Flicky. For more show content and upcoming episodes, follow us on Twitter at After the Timeout, or subscribe to our podcast for upcoming episodes. For show inquiries, you can email us at afterthetimeout@gmail.com. You can find all of our previous episodes on Anchor, Spotify, Breaker, Radio Public, Pocket Casts, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts by searching After the Timeout. We appreciate you listening. Tune in next time for more coaching content in-game, out of the game, and anything in between.